Hey there, how are ya? It's your Daily Detroit sharing what to know and where to go in Southeast Michigan. As I look out the snow-ringed studio window here in Detroit's North End, it's Wednesday, February 2nd, 2022. I'm Jer Stays, and today I hope to buoy your spirits. Metro Detroit has access to one of the greatest natural resources on the face of this very planet, the Great Lakes and the Detroit River. Most of us in our listening area get our water from one of three intakes in that waterway. But how do we monitor the water coming in? Well, the Great Lakes Water Authority has some new tech to enhance that, to get a little bit of an early warning, if you will. A new buoy in the river with sensors measures stuff like algae, conductivity, pH levels, temperature, and all kinds of technical stuff. The buoy is back from its trial run, and so to get nerdy on this, my guests are John Norton Jr., Director of Energy Research and Innovation, and Dr. Andrea Bush, Management Professional of Energy Research and Innovation, both at the Great Lakes Water Authority. We're going to dive into this, and then I have an interesting bit of naming rights news to tell you about, and I want to share with you a bit about something we're working on. But first, thanks to our awesome supporters, there are two ways to do it: buymeacoffee.com/dailydetroit for a one-time thing, and of course, our wonderful members at patreon.com/dailydetroit. Thanks to Anthony, Sarah, Maggie, Deb, Peter, Kathy, and Sandra. It really makes a huge difference. Thank you. Dr. Andrea Bush, John Norton Jr., welcome to Daily Detroit. Why was it important to enhance water quality monitoring in the Detroit River right now?
Sure. Let me just give you a little bit of background about the big picture. So we're the GLWA, the Great Lakes Water Authority, is a combined water authority. That means we treat both water and wastewater. On the water side, we treat water for just over 4 million people, about 40% of the population of the state of Michigan. And on the wastewater side, about 3 million people, just a little less perhaps. And so we're right around 30% of the population of the entire state. So we have a big system that's out there. And so we really have a lot of responsibility to look at the big picture of what are we doing and how are we doing it? And specifically with our treatment goals, how are we maintaining public health? And then on the wastewater side, how are we maintaining, ensuring public health and also protection of the environment? So that's our big picture driver. What we have done then with our energy research and innovation team, we're like the detectives, you might say. So to try to help the operational team and the engineering team figure out how to do stuff. Andrea, Dr. Bush, has done a really interesting job working with a particular focus that she'll talk about here, and that is how do we use sensors that we put out in the environment to gain more information about the things that we're doing. Think of how we used to drive in our cars with paper maps, and we'd have to pull over, in rest areas and look at, the map ahead. Well, now we have our smartphones and such, and dashboard computer systems that'll tell us what's going on. It'll even give us advance notice of things like traffic accidents and police speed traps and construction delays that'll help us do in advance or to provide advanced preparation for things that we're doing. So this is really neat.
So you already mentioned advance notice, right? And that is really key here, the location of the buoy. So the location of the buoy is 1.6 miles ahead of the intake. So we are getting information now, data that come in much earlier than the water reaches our intake. So this is about 1 to 2 hours ahead of time. We know what the water quality is like. So that's really the important part, is being proactive here and getting the advanced notification should anything change.
I'm from the east side, so one thing I've heard about over the years in the Great Lakes are algae blooms. Can we talk a bit about that?
While it's not currently an issue in the Detroit River and not a concern, we do know that harmful algae blooms are increasing. You're probably aware of Lake Erie blooms that occur seasonally. We also see this happening in Lake St. Clair. So not a concern in the Detroit River. It's really fast flowing, but we want to be really proactive here and measure in case anything increases. And really important here is for us to get that baseline, right? So the buoy has all standard water quality parameters, but we also added this total algae parameter. So to allow us to get that baseline and to understand what we see on a normal day during the season. So in case there should ever be any increase or any changes to water quality, we would be able to pick that up because we were being proactive and we do know what to expect under normal conditions.
So these sensors will be able to provide almost an early warning system, no matter what it is that's coming through, so that action can be taken downstream to the intake, as I understand it.
Yes, that's correct. And I can give you an example here for one of the standard water quality parameters. And we had a really short season, 2.5 months so far, but we could already see what really the advantages are here. So for example, there was a rain event and we had an increase in turbidity, which is expected. So the water gets a little more turbid, so there's more solids because of runoff and the water being really active and a lot of wave action going on. So we saw that increase at the buoy, and then we see it at the plant 6 to 8 hours later. So this goes to show that this is really working. We get that early warning and we can provide information ahead of time so that our operations staff can really react if necessary.
One of the things that I've mentioned on this show in the past is that water and environment doesn't really care much about our political borders. And so this story is interesting to me, too, because there's a cross-border collaboration. Can someone talk about that?
Sure. I'll start out and then I'll hand it back to Andrea there. We've been working cross-border with Mike McKay, Dr. Michael McKay of University of Windsor for a while on a number of different biological-related projects. So we have another project that we're funding and collaborating with the Water Research Foundation on detecting harmful algal blooms themselves. Like when you look at what's in the water, how do you detect it? Can you do it faster, quicker? We're working with Mike McKay also on COVID response. You may have heard of the wastewater-based epidemiology or the sewer surveillance. So everybody pees, everybody poops. We got what you are given, and you don't need to go into the doctor's office to give us that data. So there's a lot of stuff that we've already been doing with Mike. Well, it turns out we have 3 water intakes. 2 of them are in American waters, and this last one, which is the farthest down towards Lake Erie, happens to be in Canada. Not only that, they have the resources, the boats, and such to be able to organize and enable this to occur. So I'd like to hand it over to Andrea. She did the nuts and bolts. Andrea's the star of this show. She pulled together 2 different countries to work together.
I think, John, thanks. You said it all. This is an existing collaboration that we had, and that's really the important part is that we have ongoing collaborations, and then we can really, use these existing relationships for our benefit. And this cross-border collaboration is so important because we share the water, right? And we have the same goal, is excellent water quality. And so this was a great opportunity to really use our existing collaborations and make this go as smoothly as possible. And it was really excellent. It worked really well. The deployment went really smoothly. So that's one of the benefits of having these collaborations.
Long term, what are your thoughts around this? Is this something where there might be more buoys? Are there other projects on the horizon if this continues to be successful for you all?
I think so, yes. So this was a first trial this season, and we plan on deploying again in the next season. Unfortunately, we cannot keep the buoy in during the winter. But we are planning on redeploying and collecting more baseline data. That is really important part to know what is normal and use this information to see when there are peaks occurring or anything unusual. So we plan on redeploying this particular buoy. We will also assess the value of the data that's coming in, and if there's a need maybe to add any sensors or any parameters, we are considering this as well. And the deployment of this buoy will also give us the information that we need to decide if we might want to add any other intakes, additional monitoring.
The whole thing just fascinates me. It's amazing when we think about this. When we go into the doctor's office and we have a medical test, like I don't feel good. Well, then they take their temperature, you do your blood pressure, and then they start looking down into other more detailed basically tests. Well, those are sensor tests. We get information from the patient to try to figure out what's wrong with him or her. Well, the same with this is we're trying to get information from the environment. We've explored previously. We've explored satellite methods for detecting algal blooms, because the algae actually, when they're hit with light, they reflect at certain wavelengths, and so there's several services now that do that. We're looking at sensors to detect water leaks, satellite sensors to detect water leaks. Water has a specific wavelength, and this technology is how they detected water on the moon and on Mars. We've not actually been to Mars yet, but we hopefully will someday. But we know there's water there. How in the world do we know there's water when it's hundreds of miles away? That, of course, being a joke. It's more than the hundreds of miles. But what we're doing with this is the same thing: is sensors to get what's going on. Andrea's been developed a really neat project with Jeff Ram at Wayne State, looking at the differences between fecal contamination by humans and by animals. So is it a sewer system leak or a septic tank leak, or is it just the ducks and the squirrels and the geese that are all naturally in the environment? Well, this is a way of helping us figure out, because we don't really actually know these things yet. We're still at that cutting edge, you might say. It's fascinating to me.
All right. Great talk. I assume people can find you at glwater.org. Anything else?
And we would welcome collaborators. So if there's people that are working on their bachelor's, master's, PhD, research project and such, and they would like to collaborate with us, we'd be very interested in doing that.
Now, that is interesting. That's for sure. I think that would be a great way to get some experience. And I'll tell you, anything involving our water, I think, is one of the most important assets that we have in this region. Andrea, John, thank you so much for your time today on Daily Detroit.
Thank you so much.
Really do appreciate it. Thanks a bunch, sir.
Now, this one, I just had to include it ahead of our normal weekly thing with Fletcher because it's tangentially sports, but interesting from a branding perspective, which is much more my lane. Turns out the reason why, at least in part, the newly minted Washington Commanders in the NFL, they're out of Washington, D.C., are the Commanders and not the D.C. Football Club or DCFC. Well, it's because of LaRouge. ESPN reported this interesting anecdote, and I'll just drop the excerpt here. And I quote, "The DCFC name was heavily considered, and they even designed logos. They wanted to play off the temporary football team name. But during the trademark search, they discovered there was a professional soccer team in Michigan called the Detroit City Football Club, DCFC, that had the colors burgundy and gold, same as Washington." And I quote the Washington Commanders president, Jason Wright, here. Quote, "If we had gone with that without doing that check, not only the name would have been in jeopardy, but the burgundy and gold would have been in jeopardy." I'm old enough to remember when some billionaires included some DCFC stuff, apparently accidentally, in their renderings for their proposed professional thing. Funny how that goes. History doesn't repeat itself, but sometimes it does rhyme. And finally, a couple of housekeeping things. One, thanks for all the feedback to those couple of episodes last week about the future of the region, what you'd like to see. It's taken me some time to read them, and I'm going to take some of the big themes and suggestions and put them into an episode all of their own. Probably I'm going to have Devin on, but maybe some others to discuss them. Maybe if I can find a subject matter expert, someone to answer something directly, and then put them out there and see if there are ways to deal with them. I'm overwhelmed with the interest and super appreciative. Now, unprompted, I also have a lot of people in my inbox about Detroit property tax assessments. How does appraising work in a city like Detroit? All of that. Thing is, when we talked about the property values popping up, they're pretty steep. I've already started reaching out to contacts, and I'm going to do an episode on that real soon, too. My goal is in about a week. I know this is timely, but I do need a little bit of time to line everything up to explain what's happening, sort out the real estate thing, the market value, the bank appraisal, what the city says it's worth. It's all really confusing to people, it seems. And I'll also include some things that apply to most people in the coverage area to look for, because rising property values, how things work, like a lot of these things are set at the state level. I appreciate that feedback. And if you have your own questions or stories, dailydetroit@gmail.com. All right, with that, thank you so much for listening to Your Daily Detroit. I'm Jer Stays. Take care of each other, and I'll see you around town. I gotta let some dogs go play in the snow.